Okay, so I want to start with a number. $7.25. That's it. That's the federal minimum wage right now. $7.25 an hour. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, I've heard this before. Minimum wage is low. We know. Next topic. But I don't think people actually understand how broken this number is. Like, on a mathematical level. On a who made this decision and why level. So let me show you something that genuinely bothered me when I first sat down and ran the numbers. Go back to 1968 with me for a second. There's a guy. Let's call him Gary. Gary's not a genius, didn't go to college. He's 22, works at a diner, washes dishes, probably smells like grease most of the time. Gary earns the federal minimum wage. And with that minimum wage, that single dishwasher paycheck, Gary can rent a one-bedroom apartment, cover his groceries, pay his electric bill, maybe save a little. He's not rich, not even close, but he's okay. Now meet Jalen. Jalen is 24, in 2026, works at a gas station in the morning, fast food in the evening, 2 jobs, 65 hours a week. And Jalen cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment in any major American city. Same minimum wage, different worlds. Here's the number that broke my brain when I looked it up. The federal minimum wage in 1968, adjusted for inflation to 2026 dollars, was $13.23 an hour. That's from the Department of Labor's own data. Their numbers, not mine. So in real terms, what your money actually buys, the minimum wage today is worth almost half of what it was in 1968. Half. In 58 years, with everything we've built, every technological advancement, every productivity gain, every trillion-dollar company that didn't exist back then, the minimum wage got cut nearly in half in real purchasing power. And it gets worse, because $13.23 is actually the conservative number. The Economic Policy Institute, they track labor economics out of Washington, did a calculation where they asked, what if the minimum wage had kept pace, not just with inflation, but with actual worker productivity? Because here's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. The American worker has gotten dramatically more productive over the last 50 years. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, worker productivity grew 64% between 1979 and 2022. 64%. You, or your parents, or whoever, are generating 64% more economic output per hour than the same job would have produced in 1979. And wages. Wages grew 17%. So the worker got 64% more productive and got paid 17% more for it. That extra 47%? That went somewhere, just not to the worker. Anyway, the EPI calculation. If the minimum wage had kept up with that productivity growth since 1968, it would be $24 an hour today. 24. Not 7.25, 24. Now let me tell you what $7.25 actually means in 2026, because I think a lot of people who don't work minimum wage have sort of lost touch with the math. 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, $15,080 a year before taxes. The federal poverty line for a single person in 2026, that's the official government number from HHS, is $15,060. So a full-time minimum wage worker earns $20 above the official poverty line per year. $20. One car repair, one emergency room copay, 1 month where your hours got cut. And you're below the poverty line. Working full-time in the richest country in human history. And I want to stop here for a second, because there's a thing that happens every time this topic comes up. Someone, and you know exactly the someone I'm talking about, goes, well, minimum wage jobs are just for teenagers. It's not meant to be a living wage. It's just your first job before you move up. And look, I get it. That's the story. That's been the story for 40 years. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes actual data on who earns minimum wage. The median age is 24. More than half are over 20. 56% are women. Nearly a third are supporting children. Nearly a quarter have some college. These are not teenagers buying AirPods with their first paycheck. These are adults paying rent, buying groceries, raising kids on $15,080 a year. Okay, so here's the question that I think is actually the most important one. If the math is this obvious, if even the government's own numbers show that the minimum wage has lost half its value, why hasn't anyone fixed it? It hasn't moved since 2009. That is the longest stretch in American history without a federal minimum wage increase, longer than any gap in the 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s. 15 years of nothing. And the answer, the honest answer, is not complicated once you look at the right numbers. The restaurant industry, the retail industry, the hospitality industry, the three industries that employ the most minimum wage workers, spent a combined $400 million lobbying Congress in the 2024 election cycle alone. That's public record, fec.gov. You can look it up tonight. $400 million from the companies that pay the minimum wage to the people who set the minimum wage. And I want to be really clear about something here, because I don't want this to turn into a left versus right thing. This is not a partisan issue. The minimum wage froze under Obama, froze under Trump, froze under Biden. Both parties, 15 years. The people paying the lobbying money aren't paying attention to which party's in power. They're paying attention to the outcome. And the outcome for 15 years straight has been the same. $7.25. Now, I want to give you the other side of this because I think it's important to be honest. The argument against raising the minimum wage is that it will kill jobs. Businesses will close. Prices will go up. Entry-level positions disappear. And that argument isn't completely crazy. In a vacuum, basic economics would suggest make labor more expensive, demand for labor falls. But here's the thing about economic theory. It doesn't always survive contact with actual data. When Washington State raised its minimum wage to $16.28, the predicted wave of closures didn't happen. When California went to $16.50, the restaurants didn't all shut down. A 2023 paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research, and this is not a liberal or conservative organization, it's the most respected economic research body in the country, found that states that significantly raised minimum wages did not see the mass unemployment that was predicted. Some prices went up a little, some hours got trimmed, but the apocalypse didn't come. I want to end with something. In 1938, when FDR signed the minimum wage into law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, he said something that I think is the most honest framing of this whole issue. He said, "No business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country." That was the original deal. Not a starter wage, not a teenager's first paycheck, a living wage by definition. That was 1938. 88 years later, after everything this country has built, that living wage is now $20 above the federal poverty line. And if you ask why, the real answer is $400 million and 15 years of the right people staying very, very quiet. Look, I'm not here to tell you how to vote or what to do with this information. That's not what this channel is. But I do think that if you're going to talk about the economy is doing great, while the minimum wage hasn't moved since 2009, you should at least be honest about who exactly the economy is doing great for. If this is the kind of thing you want to actually understand, not the version they tell you on cable news, subscribe. Because the number that matters most to most Americans isn't the S&P 500, it's the number on their paycheck. And that number has a story.